Yeah, so I think that there is a concern in the EMDR community about when processing a client that they get overwhelmed and they exceed their windows of tolerance. And so it is a concern as clinicians learning EMDR that they learn to manage that, to contain it, to anticipate it, and to really restrict processing in those situations where they know a client can easily get overwhelmed. And so I think some of the things that are important as one is learning EMDR will be to take a full history and also understand the incident you're working on has neurological linkages. And many times I think the concern of a client who dissociates is we've picked an incident without really identifying where it goes. Now, it's one of the ways Francine used to teach was representing the incident you're working on is like the back of her hand. And once you begin processing, there can be spontaneous channels that come up, that come out of that. So we're working on a car crash, let's say, where I felt trapped and helpless. And if you just take that on face value once you begin processing, then other things can come up. And many times they follow the trapped and helpless. And suddenly I'm down here where I'm being molested, where I was trapped and helpless. And that's what gets overwhelming for not only the client, but also the clinician. So to anticipate that, I think our training approach really follows the neurological pathway and doesn't necessarily target or process just the incident, but what we represent is the entire neural network. So the automobile accident is part of trapped and helpless, maybe being bullied in school is part of trapped and helpless, and also maybe being molested is part of trapped and helpless. And so we identify all those linkages in treatment planning so that when we're ready to start, both the client and the clinician understand the clinical landscape, the neurological landscape. And then because of that, we can also vary the processing modality itself. Standard EMDR uses what I refer to as unrestricted processing, which is relatively long sets of eye movements or other bilateral stimulation, as well as a very open-ended, what do you notice, and just go with that, which encourages free association. And that's ideal, except for clients who would be overwhelmed with the free association. They could get too far into the event, they can become overwhelmed, and that's where the tendency to dissociate could occur. So with our approach, because we can use what I refer to as the processing continuum, if we know a client is going to get overwhelmed with unrestricted processing, we can bring it down and really tighten it up to a very restricted processing intervention. And in some cases, not only that, but take a traumatic event and fragment it into a sequence of smaller events so that we really cut it down into digestible experiences so that the client stays within their window of tolerance. So I think that the pre-planning, the following the core beliefs, which are really the verbalization of the motions and sensations that are in the whole neural network, and then also being able to manage and control processing really reduces the likelihood of dissociation happening in a spontaneous way. So I think that's an important piece that we really have looked into, and it helps clinicians feel safer, and it helps them feel more confident and empowered that if I have a client who has those tendencies, I can manage that. We're not going to jump into the deep end right away. We're going to get in the shallow end. We're going to go in small little increments. We can choose other events to process before we go to the big one that would overwhelm a client. So there's a lot of checks and balances in how we kind of present the material.